strong as the castle, and as those within it are well armed, vigilant, and of good courage, there is little fear of its capture. If your worship should propose terms to my mistress for the release of her prisoners, she may possibly assent to them; but if you approach her in hostile passion, and demand their liberation, I am well assured she will resist you, and well assured also she will resist you effectually."
"I shall approach her in no other sort than that of an enemy," rejoined Sir Thomas. "But thou art over confident, knave. Unless thy mistress have a legion of devils at her back, and they hold us in check, we will force a way into her dwelling. Fire and fury! Dost presume to laugh at me, fellow? Take him hence, and let him be soundly cudgelled for his insolence, Gauntlet."
"Pardon me, your worship," cried Blackadder. "I only smiled at the strange notions you entertain of my mistress."
"Why, dost mean to deny that she is a witch?" demanded Metcalfe.
"Nay, if your worship will have it so, it's not for me to contradict you," replied Blackadder.
"But I ask thee, is she not a servant of Satan? Dost thou not know it? Canst thou not prove it?" cried the knight. "Shall we put him to the torture to make him confess?"
"Ay, tie his stumps together till the blood burst forth, Sir Thomas," said Gauntlet.
"Or hang him up to yon beam by the heels,"
suggested Captain Storks. "On no account," interposed Holden. "I did not bring him hither to be dealt with in this way, and I will not permit it. If torture is to be admitted, it must be by the hands of justice, into which I require him to be delivered, and then, if he can testify aught against his mistress, he will be made to do it."
"Torture shall never wring a word from me, whether wrongfully or rightfully applied," said Blackadder, doggedly, "though I could tell you much if I chose. Now, give heed to me, Sir Thomas. You will never take Rough Lee, still less its mistress, without my help."
"What are thy terms, knave?" exclaimed the knight, pondering upon the offer. "And take heed thou triflest not with me, as I will have thee flogged within an inch of thy life, in spite of parson or justice. What are thy terms, I repeat?"
"They are for your worships here alone," replied Blackadder.
"Beware what you do, Sir Thomas," interposed Holden. "I hold it my duty to tell you, you are compromising justice in listening to the base proposals of this man, who, while offering to betray his mistress, will assuredly deceive you. You will equally deceive him in feigning to agree to terms which you cannot fulfil." "Cannot fulfil!" ejaculated the knight, highly offended. "I will have you know, sir, that Sir Thomas Metcalfe's word is his bond, and of whatever he promises he will fulfil, in spite of the devil. Body o' me, but for the respect I owe your cloth, I would give you a very different answer, reverend sir. But since you have chosen to thrust yourself unasked into the affair, I will take leave to say that I will hear this knave's proposals, and judge for myself the expedience of acceding to them. I must pray you, therefore, to withdraw. Nay, if you will not go hence peaceably, you shall perforce. Take him away, gentlemen." Thus enjoined, the Alsatian captains took each an arm of the rector, and forced him out of the room, leaving Sir Thomas alone with the prisoner. Greatly incensed at the treatment he had experienced, Holden instantly quitted the house, hastened to the rectory which adjoined the church, and, having given some messages to his household, rode off to Whalley, with the intention of acquainting Sir Ralph Assheton with all that had occurred. Sir Thomas Metcalfe remained closeted with the prisoner for a few minutes, and then, coming forth, issued orders that all should get ready to start for Rough Lee without delay. Whereupon each man emptied his flagon, pocketed the dice he had been cogging, pushed aside the shuffle board, left the loggats on the clay floor of the barn, and, grasping his weapon, halbert or caliver, as it might be, prepared to attend his leader. Sir Thomas did not relate, even to the Alsatian captains, what had passed between him and Blackadder, but it did not appear that he placed entire confidence in the latter, for though he caused his hands to be unbound, and allowed him, in consideration of his wounded state, to ride, he secretly directed Gauntlet and Storks to keep near him, and shoot him through the head if he attempted to escape. Both these personages were provided with horses as well as their leader, but all the rest of the party were on foot. Metcalfe made some inquiries after the rector, but finding he was gone, he did not concern himself further about him. Before starting, the knight, who, with all his recklessness, had a certain sense of honesty, called the girl who had been left in charge of the hostel by Bess, and gave her a sum amply sufficient to cover all the excesses of his men, adding a handsome gratuity to herself. The first part of the journey was accomplished without mischance, and the party bade fair to arrive at the end of it in safety. But as they entered the gorge, at the extremity of which Rough Lee was situated, a terrific storm burst upon them, compelling them to seek shelter in the mill, from which they were luckily not far distant at the time. The house was completely deserted, but they were well able to shift for themselves, and not over scrupulous in the manner of doing so; and as the remains of the funeral feast were not removed from the table, some of the company sat down to them, while others found their way to the cellar. The storm was of long continuance, much longer than was agreeable to Sir Thomas, and he paced the room to and fro impatiently, ever and anon walking to the window or door, to see whether it had in any degree abated, and was constantly doomed to disappointment. Instead of diminishing, it increased in violence, and it was now impossible to quit the house in safety. The lightning blazed, the thunder rattled along the overhanging rocks, and the swollen stream of Pendle Water roared at their feet. Blackadder was left under the care of the two Alsatians, but while they had shielded their eyes from the glare of the lightning, he threw open the window, and springing through it, made good his retreat. In such a storm it was in vain to follow him, even if they had dared to attempt it. In vain Sir Thomas Metcalfe fumed and fretted. In vain he heaped curses upon the bullies for their negligence. In vain he hurled menaces after the fugitive. The former paid little heed to his imprecations, and the latter was beyond his reach. The notion began to gain ground among the rest of the troop that the storm was the work of witchcraft, and occasioned general consternation. Even the knight's anger yielded to superstitious fear, and as a terrific explosion shook the rafters overhead, and threatened to bring them down upon him, he fell on his knees, and essayed, with unaccustomed lips, to murmur a prayer. But he was interrupted, for amid the deep silence succeeding the awful crash, a mocking laugh was heard, and the villainous countenance of Blackadder, rendered doubly hideous by the white lightning, was seen at the casement. The sight restored Sir Thomas at once. Drawing his sword, he flew to the window, but before he could reach it, Blackadder was gone. The next flash showed what had befallen him. In stepping backwards, he had tumbled into the mill race, and the current, increased in depth and force by the deluging rain, instantly swept him away. Half an hour after this, the violence of the storm had perceptibly diminished, and Sir Thomas and his companions began to hope that their speedy release was at hand. Latterly, the knight had abandoned all idea of attacking Rough Lee, but with the prospect of fair weather his courage returned, and he once more resolved to attempt it. He was moving about among his followers, striving to dispel their fears, and persuade them that the tempest was only the result of natural causes, when the door was suddenly thrown open, giving entrance to Bess Whitaker, who bore the miller in her arms. She stared on seeing the party assembled, and knit her brows, but said nothing till she had deposited Baldwin in a seat, when she observed to Sir Thomas that he seemed to have little scruple in taking possession of a house in its owner's absence. The knight excused himself for the intrusion by saying that he had been compelled by the storm to take refuge there with his followers, a plea readily admitted by Baldwin, who was now able to speak for himself, and the miller next explained that he had been to Rough Lee, and after many perilous adventures, into the particulars of which he did not enter, had been brought away by Bess, who had carried him home. That home he now felt would be a lonely and insecure one, unless she would consent to occupy it with him, and Bess, on being thus appealed to, affirmed that the only motive that would induce her to consent to such an arrangement would be her desire to protect him from his mischievous neighbours. While they were thus discoursing, old Mitton, who it appeared had followed them, arrived, well nigh exhausted, and Baldwin went in search of some refreshment for him.
by